I'm joined by my colleagues Mark Ridley Thomas, Paul Koretz, Kevin DeLeon, and shortly by Mr. Krikorian. We do have a quorum. Before I turn it over to our clerk to call the roll, I'd like to remind everyone by my colleagues Mark Ridley Thomas, Paul Koretz, Kevin DeLeon, and shortly by Mr. Krikorian. We do have a quorum. Before I turn it over to our clerk to call the roll, I'd like to... Something's going on with our audio. Are we good? Okay, so we're good. Before I turn it over, I'd like to remind everyone to make sure they're on mute again. But also, this is a regularly scheduled meeting followed by a special meeting. So what we'll do is we'll have the regular meeting following the regular protocols. We will then complete that regular meeting and go into a special. So with that, for our regularly scheduled meeting, Mr. Villanueva, if you could please call the roll.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Mitchell Farrell.
Present.
Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas.
Here.
Councilmember Paul Koretz.
Present.
Councilmember Kevin DeLeon.
Here.
Councilmember Paul Krikorian. You have 4 members, you have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. We'll take up to 30 minutes to hear from the public who wish to comment on items specific to today's regular agenda, and 1 minute for general public comment. Our city attorney will now explain the speaking rules to the members of the public who are calling in, and our city clerk will then provide the necessary information for the public to dial in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To members of the public calling in, when it is your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you would like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item to speak, up to 2 minutes total, and 1 minute for general public comment. We will tell you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you are not speaking on topic, or if we cannot tell whether you are speaking on a specific agenda item, you will get 1 brief warning from me or the chair. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic, or again stray off topic, the chair will cut you off and you will forfeit the rest of your speaking time, and we will move on to the next speaker. We will take up to 30 minutes total of public comment. Please press *9 to request to speak. As soon as you hear someone address you on the phone, please press *6 and state your name and state which agenda items you would like to speak on. We know the situation is not ideal, and thank you for your cooperation as we do the best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Mr. Villanueva, please read the instructions, and we've been joined by Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, sir. Members of the public who'd like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252. Again, the number is 1-669-254-5252, and use meeting ID number 160-919-4459. Again, the meeting ID number is 160-919-4459, and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press *9 to request to speak. When it's your turn to speak, an automated Zoom voice will ask you to press *6 to unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We are ready to take public comment, and just please remember, this is our regularly scheduled meeting, so items that are germane to this agenda, you have 1 minute for each, up to 2 minutes for all items, and then 1 minute for general public comment, and we are ready to go.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Yeah, Daniel Gus. I'd like to speak on all items and general public comment.
All right, 2 minutes for the items and 1 minute for general.
Okay. Mr. O'Farrell, you need to recuse yourself from item number 3. That's because it's regarding Light Up Navajo. And I'm going to read from IndianCountryToday.com, Mr. O'Farrell, a member of the Wyandotte Nation, and the Ione Native American Los Angeles City Council introduced a motion that moves the city toward landmark collaboration with the Navajo Nation, the largest federally recognized tribe in the United States. So you have a conflict of interest because you have pursued this other relationship with the Navajo Nation. You must recuse yourself from this vote. And I'm sure if it's a good agenda item, it'll pass on its own without your vote. But you have a conflict of interest. Mr. O'Farrell must recuse himself and also rescind his earlier votes on this issue if he made any earlier votes on this issue. As a proud Native American, I'm sure he will do the right thing. Item number 4, council members. There is no company called CR and R. I challenge you to find me a company named CR and R. No such company exists. Who wrote this? And did you previously vote on this? No such company, CR and R, exists. The company is CR ampersand R. You must go back and change every single prior reference to CR and AND-R Incorporated because no such entity exists. Because the further that you push this, the more you're going to have to go back and unwind it. Why not correct it now? Give Dan a win here. Council members, I want to warn you, going on to my general public comment, about something that I exposed yesterday and today, illegal meetings and illegal votes. Yesterday, the Police Permit Review Commission was running an illegal meeting with a commissioner whose appointment had expired months earlier. And now there are state bar complaints against both the chair and the deputy city attorney. I would caution you as members of this committee, Energy, Climate Change, Environmental Justice, et cetera, boy, there's a lot of words in this title. I would urge you to go back and make sure that every commissioner that you have advanced on this, on the energy climate projects, that everyone voted only when they had active commissionerships, because there is now a mess in the police permit review. And I would encourage you to make sure that your ducks in a row, because there is now a mess there with Deputy City Attorney Jonathan Bisley.
Thank you. Thank you. That is your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Caller.
Hello?
There. Yes, hello, we can hear you. State your name and the items you'd like to speak on, please.
Hi, this is Kathy Schaefer, San Fernando Valley Climate Reality Project with general public comment.
All right, 1 minute. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. I usually call in for a specific agenda item, but today I'm calling to thank each of you for your tireless commitment to the environment. As Councilmember O'Farrell noted in his comments yesterday, there's a moral imperative to preserve and protect our planet. Your visions and actions, as well as your perseverance over many years, will continue to make a difference for our children and grandchildren. So congratulations on the passage of the motion for 100% renewable yesterday, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership and all that you have done for so long. And I know that you will continue to do so as we move forward towards a sustainable future. Thank you so much.
Caller, thank you for your uplifting comments just then. Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hello?
Please state
Hello?
your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hi, my name is David. I would like to speak on item number 1 and 2 and general public comment, please.
All right, sir, you have 2 minutes for the items and 1 minute for general.
Yes, I do see item 1, you guys are talking about implementation of water conservation. I am a supporter of that because I do use one of those low flow shower heads, and I put it on the mist mode, so that's like spraying like in mist mode, so I could save water. Now, item number 2, talk about storm water capture, which is a good thing to to collect water and put it in the reservoir. The one thing we don't hear this council talking about is building water desalination plants. Now, other cities, jurisdictions do have water desalination plants, and Los Angeles does not have that. Now, what I do like about former Mayor Eric Garcetti is that he's talking about building a toilet-to-tap water system where sewer water does not get discharged after being cleaned and filtered back into the ocean. It gets back into the pipes so that the water can continue to flow through the pipes to serve the City of Los Angeles residents. Now, general public comment. One thing I would like to bring to this council's attention is that now we do have callers and people that want to make comments, which is good, but you also have people who can't communicate, who can't speak. They can only communicate in sign language. Now, I would like to ask if you can provide accommodations to those people as well, because it's just not fair that people who can speak, and then there are those who can only communicate in sign language. I'd like to ask this council if you guys can host the meeting in a form of Zoom. Because Zoom, you can do a live cam and people can communicate sign language, and then you have a sign language interpreter speak for the person who can't speak. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hello, my name is Estella Suarez Hamilton. Before I begin, are we commenting on special items?
This is the regular meeting. We'll adjourn this once we complete the business, and then we'll start our special hearing. So for this comment, it's for this agenda specifically.
Will we have another comment section in the special meeting?
You will.
Okay, I'm talking on item 1, 2, and then public comment after.
All right. You have 2 minutes for the items and 1 minute for public.
Okay, my intention is to provide real-life context for items 1 and 2. I know they're not going to be about the policy because I'm not a policymaker, but I want to quote a testimony from NPR, which is from a Nevada homeless man whose wife drowned in a city tunnel that was being flushed. So this is during a storm. We're talking about storm water collection. I remember she turns around and she's looking at me, and I'm trying to swim towards her and I can't catch up with her. As I turn around, here comes the shopping cart. It's a plastic shopping cart, and it comes and hits her and flips on top of her like a lid. I can't get the shopping cart off of her. I'm doing everything I can. I'm screaming for help because there's a road right there. Nobody's doing nothing. I can't get this cart off of her. The water starts rising in a matter of seconds, minutes. All of a sudden, it's overflowing the sides onto the streets. She's covered up. I can't do anything except yell for help. I managed to climb up on the fence line and crab walk all around to this hole in the fence. It's about 8 minutes that I think she's underwater. That's from an NPR testimony in Nevada. Now for my public comment. Trust the science. I want to provide some historic context on how we got to the concept of trusting the science. A quote from Andrea Patterson's book, Germs and Jim Crow, The Impact of Microbiology on Public Health Policies in Progressive-Era American South. Fred Hughes' column, Social Eugenics, ran weekly in the Los Angeles Times during the 1930s. The U.S. Public Health Service declared eugenics as fact, not fad. Dr. H. Johnson, a white physician in Atlanta, called for a city ordinance endorsing strict segregation of tuberculosis victims. He recommended that a black representative might be considered to make this segregation effort more successful. Aware of the fact that most public health services were reluctant to employ blacks, Johnson expressed the hope that his progressive idea would meet no hostility. Vaccine passports are a fossil of this destructive practice. Stop demanding we trust the science. Eugenics will not be forgotten. We the people are opposed to the vaccine-proof ordinance. Thank you for my time.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Yes, we're in the regular meeting, right? Yes. Oh, okay.
Yes, Wayne Spindler, what items would you like to speak on?
Sir, I'm goat puppet, sir.
Okay, the clock should be ticking.
Yeah, I'm not.
So
I'm not.
you need,
that,
you
I'm
need,
not
you need
that.
to,
No.
what's your items?
Yeah, all items. Yes,
Okay, 2 minutes.
I'm all items in general comments, sir. But don't call me, accuse me of being him, because he's an asshole. Now, let's get to this. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just talking, sir. Oh, go ahead. Okay, thank you. Now, let's get to item number 3 here. Why, you dirty Indian, Mitchell Farrell, trying to take money from the white man and appropriate it to the red people over there in Arizona. Those goddamn Navajos, they're trying to take us Western settlers and take away our land and our cash for their electric project. And then, as somebody I think pointed out, Mitch O'Farrell was born Mitch Farrell of Tulsa, Oklahoma, I believe, and now you're claiming you're a Native American or an Indian, right? Well, you have a conflict of interest. And you can't be giving your tribe, and that's what it is, Los Angeles City taxpayer
So that's
money
your
to fund
general public
tribe.
comment. Would you like to speak on the items?
Yeah, well, I'm speaking on number 3, sir. Isn't number 3 that you're trying to expropriate city money for your tribe, the Navajos? I think so. You have a conflict of interest. And Mr. Krikorian, if you were here, would agree, because he's a nice man. Now we get to number 1. The fucking water problem. You people, you humans use too much goddamn water and you waste water. And you do shit like have swimming pools? Fuck you humans. I'm a billy goat. I only use an average of 200 gallons of water a year. And that's all you should use. Remember, do what Wayne does. He never bathes, and he takes and conserves water, that stinking asshole. Now I'll get to my general comment. You're on probation, sir. Oh, no. I'm sorry you heard that. Now, general comment. This committee is completely fucked up today. Why do you have 2 meetings instead of 1 and want to put them back to back? How come you're canceling all your other meetings? Why don't you have a Friday council meeting so that I can appear and I can give you all of my public comment and good deeds for each Friday? Remember that? When I used to come on Fridays and tell you what a good job you're doing on certain things? Oh, the good old days. And sign language. You can't have sign language this way. No. We want video meetings.
Okay, that's
So
it.
we can
Thank
see-
you. Next caller, please.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. Please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Caller, are you there?
Egg Hale, items 1 and 2.
All right, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you to Councilmember O'Farrell for your hard work on creating safe and unobstructed right-of-ways and for your work on the LA 100 plan. All people need secure access to city sidewalks and spaces, which is the cornerstone of a safe and satisfying urban experience and is essential to the well-being of both residents and business owners. The city must adopt a process to maintain clean, safe, and accessible right-of-ways. It must be humane and fair to all and provide the means to engage with persons experiencing homelessness and provide housing and needed services to this vulnerable population.
I'm
A
sorry,
successful
caller, are you
solution-
speaking on items on the special agenda or the regular agenda?
Special agendas, item 1 and 2.
Okay, we'll be taking comment on the special agenda during the special meeting session. Right now, we're taking
Okay.
comment on agenda items 1 through 4 on the regular agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hello?
We can hear you, caller. Which items would you like to speak and state your name?
Yeah, just public comment. My name is James.
Okay, James, 1 minute, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about there's a lot of catalytic converters being stolen, and very, very concerned about it because they help the air quality in our area, and I think we shouldn't strengthen the laws on that. And also concerned about these loud exhausts that have been popping up. I don't know if they use catalytic converters, but they should. So that's what I was concerned about, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
The laws on that,
And with the
also
part for
about
items,
loud exhausts
can you hear me?
that have been popping up.
Caller, hold for a moment because we're getting some audio issues, but please hold for us.
Okay, very well.
That's what I was concerned about, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Hello?
Please stay on, caller.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're clear now. Now state your name and speak on.
There's a lot of background noise. Can somebody please mute
sorry,
the other caller?
sorry.
'Cause
Yeah, sorry, hold on. The
I
other
want
caller
to talk
hung.
about the chief
Yeah.
administrative officer, the chief legislative,
So caller, please hold. Stay.
for the
So,
outreach engagement framework. Emergency
caller, please hold. We're getting feedback.
sanitation outreach to ensure better chance.
Mr. Villanueva, are we having, what's the issue with our audio today? It's like it's recording and then repeating what a caller just made. It's a strange situation we're having. Are we good now for the current caller?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, according to our system support, the caller needs to turn down their volume to avoid
Okay. All right, so caller on the phone now, if you could just please turn down your volume completely and then begin all over again.
Yeah, there isn't anything from, it's not from here. It's somebody else. Somebody else who's on hold is doing it. Can you mute everybody else's call? Because I want to talk about the successful housing placement for people experiencing homelessness. With the chief legislative report, item number 20-1376.
All right, so caller on the phone
Actually, or both, it's 21-0329.
all over again.
It's somebody else's, though. Can you help me out with that? Which is kind of important.
Yeah, please hold again. Please hold your remarks. Everyone, just make sure you're on mute or your audio is turned down if you're a caller, or if you're at City Hall. Or do we have one? I think we only have one line going from what I can see. I don't think we have two lines going.
Yes, Mr. Chair, according to our system support, everyone is muted except for the caller.
Okay, so caller, if you could just double check and make sure that your own sound is turned down completely, and then begin again, please.
You're on mute, or your audio is turned down if you're a caller, or if you're at City Hall.
Yeah, I think the feedback is coming from you, caller, and now you're on mute. Yeah, I think that was it. I don't think we were able to resolve that audio issue. Do we have any other callers?
Mr. Chair, there are no more callers in the queue.
No more callers in the queue. I apologize for the audio issues that we had here, but we will move on now. Thank you so much. So that does conclude public comment. And unless there is an objection, colleagues, I'd like to move items 1, 2, 3, and 4 on consent. But before I do, let me pause for a moment. City Attorney Cadigan, the first caller mentioned that he feels there is a conflict on 2 items. What is your opinion of the issue that he raised on the 2 items?
Well, just based on the facts that he stated, I don't have an opinion that there would be a conflict, but if you'd like to get a formal research and legal opinion from our office, we'd be happy to do that.
No, I'll hold off on that because I agree with you. I concur with you. The intent of the item on the consultant contractor is very clear. And if it's an ampersand or an and, I don't think there's a conflict with the intent of the vote. And council members and elected officials frequently speak in strong support of items that are near and dear to them and then proceed to vote on them regardless. So I will agree with you and we'll move forward with the votes. I'd like to move to items 1, 2, 3, and 4 on consent, but I'd like to approve item 1 as amended for the second and third moving clause. But before I read that, do we agree to move 2, 3, and 4 on consent? Let's call the roll on 2, 3, and 4, please.
Councilmember Mitchell Farrell,
Aye.
Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Koretz, Councilmember Paul Koretz, Councilmember Kevin De Leon,
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Krikorian.
Aye.
The 2, 3, and 4 passes, sir.
Terrific, thank you. And then I'd like to approve item 1 as amended for the second and third moving clause to read the following. I further move that the Department of Water and Power and the Metropolitan Water District be requested to report to the council as to local water resiliency strategies that can be employed in the region, including communication to customers and rebates, rate design, or other incentives to conservation in order to effectively meet the growing drought crises. I further move that the Department of Water and Power be requested to report back on the potential impacts to Hoover Dam and other hydropower generation due to the historic low water levels at Lake Mead and elsewhere, as well as steps that should be taken in the near and long term to protect the city and its ratepayers from the impacts of the drought. And Mr. Krikorian, I believe you might have something to add.
Mr. Chairman, I think you encompassed the intention of what we had wanted to add. So thank you.
Terrific. All right, colleagues, seeing as there are no other requests, then we can take the roll to approve item 1 as amended.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Mitchell Farrell,
Aye.
Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Koretz,
Aye.
Councilmember Kevin De Leon,
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Krikorian.
Aye.
Item 1 is approved as amended, Mr. Chair.
Terrific. So, Mr. Villanueva, does that conclude all the business in our regularly scheduled meeting?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So,
Mr. Chair, could I
Yes.
insert for 1 second that I stepped away for a second, but if I could be added on as an I vote to the items that I just missed, that would be great.
Noted, Mr. Krikorian. Councilmember Koretz. It's
Thank you.
Sorry.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Villanueva. So with that, I believe we can adjourn our regular meeting and move into our special meeting. Our regular meeting is officially adjourned. Mr. Villanueva, if you could please call the roll for our special.
Certainly, sir. Councilmember Mitchell Farrell,
Present.
Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas,
Here.
Councilmember Paul Koretz,
Here.
Councilmember Kevin De Leon,
Here.
Councilmember Paul Krikorian.
Here.
Everyone's present, sir. You have a quorum.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Madam City Attorney, if you could please read the dial-in rules at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To members of the public calling in, when it is your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you would like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item to speak, up to 2 minutes total. There will be no general public comment. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you're not speaking on topic, or if we cannot tell whether you are speaking on a specific agenda item, you will get one brief warning from me or the chair. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic, the chair will cut you off and you will forego the rest of your speaking time, and we will move on to the next speaker. We will take up to 30 minutes total of public comment. Please press *9 to request to speak. As soon as you hear someone address you on the phone, please press *6 and state your name and state which agenda items you would like to speak on. We know the situation is not ideal, and thank you for your cooperation as we do the best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Villanueva. If you could please read the instructions again.
Yes, sir. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the special agenda should call 1-669-254-5252. Again, the number is 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-919-4459. Again, the meeting ID number is 160-919-4459, and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press *9 to request to speak.
Thank you, sir. We are ready to take the first caller.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Yeah, Daniel Gus, both items, please.
All right, 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So, council members, sometimes your best intentions are sidelined by your tortured political correctness. Let me bring to you item number 1, in which you refer to people experiencing homelessness. That is a noun, or it is a verb, or it is an adjective. But in item number 2, you refer to a different class of people. And I'm asking for you to clarify the difference between the people in item 1 and item 2. In item 2, you're referring to people who are homeless. Now, that's a noun. Clearly, because you're such a politically correct group of people, you need to explain to the people, or correct through every damn document where you use these phrases, the difference between the way you refer to the group of people in item number 1 and item number 2. In item number 1, you're describing people experiencing homelessness. Okay, so that's a group of people. And in group number 2, you're talking about people who are homeless. What is the difference? Because that's exactly why I pointed out in the other meeting that there is no company called CR&R. It's CR&R. And when you're talking about contracts, the difference between an and an ampersand, just like in the special meeting agenda, does make a difference. Ask Sony Pictures or Paramount or Universal. Ask the Writers Guild of America, what's the difference between an and an ampersand? In the and this will be relevant to this item. In the writing world, when you say this was written by Joe and Paul, it means that they wrote the thing separately. But when you use an ampersand, and you say Joe ampersand Paul,
Thank you,
it's
caller.
Joe and Paul wrote it
Next
together.
caller, please.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Estella Suarez Hamilton. Can I speak on 1 and 2?
Yes, 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I think that you guys have taken some really big steps towards really limiting people's ability to be involved in their own government. I'm really frustrated. I see 1 and 2, right? This is a special agenda. I've been attending these meetings. We have times where special agendas are included in the comment section, and sometimes they're not. The Brown Act and the Open Meeting Act give you leeway for your job to be able to be done properly. It is not so that you can limit free speech not so you can limit civil participation. You're talking about homeless people now. Please listen to the NPR testimony from that man who his wife drowned. Please listen to that, because you need to realize that you will never be us. You will never be like us. You are exceptional people. You have never been a public person. You will never be a public person. You are exceptional, and that is not a compliment. You guys are not normal. You live in huge houses, and you have never been hungry for a night. You are writing laws for our generation, our children, and you are limiting our voices. You're about to mute me. Push a button, end my voice. Write a law, limit our rights. Shame on you. Shame on all of you. Not one woman in this quorum other than the attorney. And all she does is push paper. What is your job? It's an oppressor. Shame on you.
Next caller, please.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Nate, please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Good morning, council members. This is Aaron Taxi from the Building Owners and Managers Association, Greater Los Angeles, and I'm speaking to both items.
All right, 2 minutes, please go ahead.
Good morning. Let me first begin by thanking Councilmember O'Farrell for his leadership on keeping our rights of way safe and clean, and on the LA 100 plan. We need the city to have a humane and fair process that focuses on engaging, housing, and providing quality services to individuals experiencing homelessness, all while maintaining a clean and safe right-of-way. Both can and both must happen at the same time. People obviously need accessible sidewalks and spaces, but this is also an imperative for economic recovery. After all, workers can only safely return to their offices, and the overall vitality of our commercial corridors and our ability to enhance multimodal transportation are all contingent on a safe and clean right-of-way. BOMA GLA therefore encourages the council and city staff to implement a humane and fair engagement strategy towards individuals experiencing homelessness on our major rights-of-way, while making our rights-of-way safer, cleaner, and more accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hello, my name is Marina Martos with Kilroy Realty Corporation. Can you hear me?
We can. Would you like to
Great.
speak on item 1 or 2 or both?
Item 1, please.
Okay, 1 minute, please go ahead.
I'd like to echo Aaron Taxi's comments with BOMA GLA. We are property owners in Hollywood as well as based in Los Angeles with Kilroy Realty Corporation, of course. And we want to thank you, Councilmember O'Farrell, for your leadership in keeping our streets safe and sanitary for all Angelinos, as well as for your work on the LA 100 plan. We are really reliant on the vitality of our communities, and that also is tied in very closely with how the public realm is doing. And so it is very imperative for the vitality of Hollywood, the vitality of this city, that we have safe and sanitary streets. So we're really supportive of item 1 for the enhanced engagement and service-based approach to addressing the issues that we're seeing in Hollywood and everywhere in LA, and we would really like to support these items moving forward.
Thank you,
That's all
caller.
for us.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Yes, Your Excellency. Items 1 and 2 and
2 minutes,
special
please go
general
right
comment.
ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, I just don't understand why Mark Ridley Monkey was waiving these two items out of his Homeless and Poverty Committee. That's where they really belong. Oh, well, they do this because it's further conspiracy to money launder. Oh, I see. Yes, bait and switch. I like that. Yeah. So we have the Academy of Country Music on Balboa in the 101.
You're off topic. Off topic. One or two. Talk about the items.
I'm trying, asshole. I'm talking about people experiencing homelessness down by there. Yes.
Yeah, you're talking nonsense. Get on the items.
Well done. Okay. Well, what we want to do is have Mr. Koretz power wash his sidewalks so that he can move these homeless criminals off of our sidewalks and clean up all the shit and needles underneath those big boxes that they live in. But he won't do it. So hopefully today, with the help of the great one, Mr. Krikorian, he will convince him to do it because that's what Paul wants to do in Studio City. That's why he got rid of Jessica Folge. Yes, because he's serious. And again, Kevin De Leon wants to help out Goat Puppet. Yes. Now, I hope that Mitchell Farrell wants to help out Goat Puppet so he can go to Sizzler and 4th and Vermont again.
Yeah, way off topic again. Way off topic. Stick to the items. Stick to the items.
Okay. Yes, again, there is no difference between people experiencing homelessness and homeless. They're all just really drugged out of their minds and fucked up. There's plenty of housing. All you have to do is go to another state. They got all kinds of cheap houses. Arizona, Nevada, Iowa,
Next caller, please.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
My name is Samantha, and my name is Samantha, and I'd like to speak to both items 1 and 2, please.
All right, 2 minutes, Samantha. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak as a property manager, commercial property manager in LA, and as my clients, my tenants, and my visitors are beginning to continue their implementation of their return to work policies, we feel it's imperative that we're able to provide, accessible sidewalks and spaces for path of travel for those persons who are both visiting and entering our buildings. We support of items 1 and 2 because we feel that there needs to be a humane and fair process to take place so that the services can be provided to those individuals that are without housing and obstructing access to public path of travel and right-of-way. We also feel strongly that a focus on maintaining a safe and clean right-of-way, without that, it will delay the economic recovery of the businesses, building owners in the Los Angeles. The veracity of Los Angeles' return to brick and mortar workplaces within our commercial corridors is dependent upon us creating a safe environment for all of the inhabitants of Los Angeles. I'd like to thank the council and council member O'Farrell for his work to keep the right-of-way safe, and as well as the LA 100 plan. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, caller.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. Please state your name.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Zachary Worma, Legislative Affairs Manager at the Downtown Women's Center, calling on items 1 and 2.
All right, 2 minutes, Zachary. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Downtown Women's Center stands in strong support of the swift passage and enactment of the proposed streets engagement strategy. As it stands, there are motions and efforts underway to push Los Angeles towards re-embracing the failed and regressive policies of enforcement-driven service provision, which criminalize and re-traumatize unsheltered residents and put personal stability further out of reach. As we've seen repeatedly in the city's history, leading with enforcement makes it more difficult for our unsheltered neighbors to connect or remain connected to services and to permanently break the cycle of houselessness. Nor does enforcement actually reduce the number of encampments across Los Angeles, as it only shuffles people from one corner of the city to the next. The proposed streets engagement strategy is a critical opportunity for Los Angeles to powerfully center the reality that the way to end homelessness is led by trauma-informed services, focusing on connecting people to permanent housing, not simply pushing them farther to the margins. By failing to approve the streets engagement strategy by tomorrow, September 3rd, when LAMC 4118 goes into effect, the city will be triggering an ad hoc approach to regulating public space without clear protocols informed by best practices. The Downtown Women's Center, we know that women experiencing homelessness, particularly unaccompanied women, are disproportionately survivors of trauma and violence, and they wait, on average, more than twice as long as men to access stable housing. A streets engagement strategy that meaningfully and thoughtfully engages unsheltered neighbors while connecting people to permanent housing will be a powerful tool to end homelessness for both women and men in Los Angeles. Again, we urge swift passage of these items for you today and support for docketing the strategy for the full council as soon as possible. And if there's an opportunity to incorporate the city's proposed Commission on Lived Experience into the strategy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. Go ahead, state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Vida Sharma, and I'd like to speak on item 1.
All right, you have 1 minute. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to comment. I would just like to echo what the previous caller said. I have a very brief comment, and that is just that given the Chief Legislative Analyst's extensive report that is being reviewed today, that has a robust street engagement program, I just don't see how we can start enforcing a law criminalizing homelessness beginning tomorrow without this framework already being in place. It's going to entail a lot of work, a lot of training, a lot of staff, a lot of funding, and it just doesn't make any sense that the 4118 can be implemented as of tomorrow, given this report and given the groundwork that needs to be laid in advance of pursuing the street engagement program. So I guess I'm just a little confused. I think that this obviously should be adopted, but it's a condition precedent to doing any enforcement.
Thank you,
That's all.
caller.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. Go ahead, state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Pete White, I'd like to speak on items 1 and 2.
All right, you have 2 minutes, sir. Please go ahead.
The newly amended Section 4118 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code reads like a combination of 1, political pettiness, a gross overreach of power in order to banish the visibly growing population of homeless Angelenos, and 3, a return to failed strategies and tactics that simply push the problem from one district to another, extensively guaranteeing incarceration, use of force, litigation, and death. Senior Assistant City Attorney Valerie Flores, author of the amended ordinance, has pushed aggressively over the years for many of the elements found in the latest version of Section 4118. She's actually pushed for even more drastic measures in the past, but that's another writing a story to talk about on another day. The amendment is very clear, though, in its intent to remove any visible signs of homelessness within the 503 square miles of Los Angeles, period. The rhetoric about its kind and human approach does not match the cruel reality of what this amendment will actually do. The ordinance makes it very clear that there will be no sitting, lying, sleeping, storing, using, maintaining, or placing personal property in the public right-of-way. It then goes further to prescribe the distance homeless people must be from an exhaustive list of places where homeless people are forced to reside, unutilized driveways and loading docks, operational or usable buildings, any permitted event, clear nod to Film LA, bike lanes and bike paths, parks, schools, libraries, other designated as sensitive use facilities, freeway ramps, tunnels, bridges, pedestrian bridge, subway, washway, spreading ground, or active railway, or anywhere near 1,000 feet of a facility open after January 2018 that provides safe sleep and safe parking to homeless persons or that serves as a navigation center.
Thank you.
Council,
Thank you,
we will
caller.
surely attend.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. Please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Marty Shelton.
Okay, Marty, which items would you like to speak on?
I'd like to speak on items 1 and 2.
All right, Mr. Shelton, 2 minutes, please. Go right ahead.
Great, thank you. Thank you, members of the council, and certainly Mitchell Farrell, our representative for Hollywood, which is where I have my properties. And I just was able to get a copy of the report this morning. Didn't have time to read through it entirely, but I'm hoping that in your efforts to implement this program, that there's some form of enforcement that can be provided. I understand the need for humanity and taking care of the homeless and doing outreach to the unhoused on the street. I'll give you an example of a situation that just happened to me recently. One of my buildings, I stood out in front of my property and watched a homeless person rip the stucco off the side of the building. And I had to call the Hollywood Partnership Bid Patrol to come out. They had LAPD come out. They arrested the person, but I had damage to the building that cost thousands of dollars. Subsequently, after that was done, I had windows broken out of the building. It's an ongoing situation with the population on the street. I can't say that they're criminals, but it's a problem that needs to be addressed in a enforcement effort as well as outreach that you're planning in your program. It's commendable that you're taking these efforts to do the outreach that you're doing, but there certainly needs to be some form of enforcement as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. State your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hi, this is Karen Lauterbach, Venice Family Clinic. I'd like to speak on item number 1.
All right, you have 1 minute. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. We are a community health center in the West Side. We serve over 27,000 patients, and over 4,000 of them are people experiencing homelessness. We want to greatly encourage a street engagement strategy being passed. We think that this is imperative to have successful strategies in the street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Eric Ades, and I would like to speak on items 1 and 2.
All right, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good morning, council members. My name is Eric Ades. I'm with the United Way of Greater LA and Home for Good. I'm writing to urge you all to move forward and implement the proposed street engagement strategy and related outreach and engagement framework. When council members voted to update LAMC 4118, they also made a commitment to pass a street engagement strategy to ensure that any implementation of the new code would be preceded by outreach and engagement to ensure connection to services and housing and to minimize the role of law enforcement. Years of failed approaches have taught us that enforcement-led approaches to unsheltered homelessness only make it more difficult for people experiencing street homelessness to come inside permanently. In actuality, displacement, trauma, and services connection created by enforcement-based policies actively harm unsheltered individuals while doing little to reduce the number of encampments in our communities. We know that when housing resources are available and a strategic outreach plan is in place, we can successfully move people off the streets and into housing. The street engagement strategy helps us accomplish this while minimizing the potential negative impacts of enforcement of 4118. With LAMC 4118 set to go into effect tomorrow, we ask that you act swiftly and approve the street engagement strategy as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what you would like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Paul Rubenstein. I'd like to speak on items 1 and 2.
All right, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good morning. I am speaking this morning on behalf of St. Joseph Center to urge you to implement the street engagement strategy as soon as possible. St. Joseph Center's recent experience on Venice Beach, during which more than 200 people left the street and got on a path to permanent housing, demonstrates that service providers working cooperatively with city departments can successfully help unhoused people move off the street and into safe and stable living situations, provided that a strategic outreach plan has been developed and housing resources are available. The city's history, meanwhile, has shown us that an enforcement-only approach just makes it harder for unsheltered people to connect with services and get off the street for good. Enforcement tactics on their own have always consistently failed to produce any long-term reduction in the number of street encampments. In July, the City Council committed to adopting a street strategy grounded in best practices. You must now act before 4118 takes effect to keep that promise and ensure that we have a system in place that treats all of our unhoused neighbors in all council districts fairly and consistently across the city. Thank you, and I urge you to act today. And I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Peggy Lee Kennedy with the Venice Justice Committee, and I'd like to speak on item 1 and 2.
All right, Ms. Kennedy, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
You know, I have a lot of critiques for this engagement strategy, but criminalization is a horror scene. I help run a citation clinic that's been in operation since September 2014, and I'm here to tell you criminalization, law enforcement-led efforts are harmful to people. They hurt people, and we need to do a care-first tactic. And I don't understand why people think law enforcement should be involved in any way. We need real solutions for people to go, not just a hotel room. We need permanent housing. That is the end solution. So getting people in hotels sounds really good. And, this, tactic of getting people off the street so you don't have to look at them by any means possible is super inappropriate in any way. We need housing. Thank you very much, and I hope you will keep that in mind for the rest of your terms. I yield my time.
Thank you.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Yes, good morning. My name is Jane Demian. I would like to speak on items 1 and 2.
All right, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I read the CLA's report. Thank you very much for putting that out for the public. I do support the street engagement strategy, but I would like to point out that it is linked to LAMC 4118. The effective date is tomorrow. However, I and other volunteers, we do outreach with the unhoused in our communities, and people have been receiving these citations even before the law is in effect, which is very concerning because it shows that there's an arbitrary nature to issuing these citations, which, as Peggy Lee just said, hurts these folks long term. They're unable to pay these citations. They probably will not be able to get transportation to go to court, to appear in court. It'll turn into a warrant. That will create even more obstacles to housing. So in terms of housing, what we really need is permanent housing, as has been stated many times. We've had a lack of both temporary and permanent housing. We also have evictions that are occurring right now, and even more will be occurring as of September 30th, once the state law expires. So I think it's really important to remember that these strategies, the street engagement strategy is a really great idea, but linking it to 4118 and linking it to these types of enforcements is not helpful. The sitting, lying, sleeping, those behaviors are not criminal activities. The caller mentioned having stucco pulled off of his building. That is a criminal activity in my view, but it is not sitting, lying, or sleeping. So let's be very clear that the people who are unhoused really need temporary housing and especially permanent housing. So I would support the 25,000 units by 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we go to the next caller, let me just say that the September 30th deadline for evictions, where eviction proceedings can begin across the state, is accurate. But in the city of Los Angeles, we enacted eviction protections that go 1 year after the emergency order is lifted, or the year 2023, whichever comes first. There's been a lot of misreporting about this all week long in relation to the new state subsidy and accessing the funds for all of your back rent. And what several publications and news outlets have failed to mention is that in Los Angeles, the evictions are extended for 1 year, as I mentioned, after the local emergency order is lifted. So Los Angeles City residents have protection from eviction well beyond September 30th and probably much longer than a year after this coming September 30th. Just want to state that for the record. Next caller, please.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on. Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
We need to go with next caller then.
Caller, please state your name and what items you would like to speak on.
Caller, please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on and turn down your volume. It appears that that was our last caller.
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are no more speakers in the queue.
Thank you. So we got through all of the folks who called in. Thank you. That concludes our public comment. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to let your feelings and thoughts be known. We appreciate that. Colleagues, I'd now like to take items 1 and 2 together. And Mr. Prieto, if you'll read the items.
Certainly, Mr. Chair and members. Item number 1 relates to City Administrative Officer and Chief Legislative Analyst reports relative to the outreach engagement framework consisting of emergency outreach, service-focused outreach, sanitation outreach to ensure a better chance of successful housing placement for people experiencing homelessness. And number 2, Mr. Chair, Chief Legislative Analyst report relative to outreach engagement framework consisting of emergency outreach, service-focused outreach, sanitation outreach to ensure a better chance of successful housing placement for people experiencing homelessness. Completes the items, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'd like to begin today's special hearing by thanking the City Administrative Officer and the Chief Legislative Analyst offices, both offices, for their diligent research and recommendations regarding the outreach reports before us today. As we all know, this is not an easy topic. It requires an immense amount of thoughtfulness, research, sensitivity, nuance as we discuss the issues regarding homelessness. I'd also like to thank Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas, Chair of the Homelessness and Poverty Committee, who has heard this topic multiple times in his committee and has long advocated his whole career for effective and compassionate outreach, including compassionate compliance in relation to 4118. Mr. Ridley Thomas is well known for his compassionate approach to addressing the crises of the day. And so, Mr. Ridley Thomas, I salute you for your career-long efforts in this arena. As I've always stated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Making sure people have a roof over their heads is always the #1 priority. Let me repeat that housing must be our #1 priority, and I will state unequivocally it is. No matter what else we talk about today, our conversation must be grounded in this endeavor. Something to think about that can color this whole conversation is the fact that the state has approved an additional over $5 billion in its current budget for homelessness services and housing across the state of California. And if the city of Los Angeles gets its commensurate share of that funding, we're talking upwards of $2 billion additionally that we haven't even yet received to help address this issue. And you better believe that we're going to go after that money. And I and probably a few others will be going to Sacramento in a few weeks to talk about this exact issue of the funding that is coming to our cities. Commensurate with successfully housing people experiencing homelessness is effective outreach. Again, outreach that results in getting people indoors. Conducting outreach is not new for the city of LA. Outreach and connecting people experiencing homelessness to resources, shelter, and housing has been conducted for years, and over the past several months has been stepped up as never before. But our methods can always be improved as we continue to incorporate best practices and approaches for compassionate and effective outreach that results in successful outcomes, that puts people on a path to wellness and not accommodates them where they are living on the street indefinitely. Before we start our conversation on this subject, I'd like to state something for the record. While there are sections of 4118, the ordinance, that could be enforced starting tomorrow, which could have always be enforced, and you will likely see enforcement, is in relation to ADA compliance, which should have already been a focus before federal legislation, since it requires ADA access. But even that is not criminalizing people experiencing homelessness. It's simply asserting that the city will follow federal law and making sure that sidewalks are clear and accessible. Again, it's not hauling people to jail. It's simply making sure our sidewalks are clear. I also want to remind the public that the sections of the ordinance requiring resolutions and signage shall not be enforced until this outreach piece is approved by the council. So 4118 it goes into effect tomorrow on the books. However, because of the resolutions requiring signage, there will be no enforcement until the outreach piece is approved by council. Colleagues, before we begin our conversation and Q&A in today's special committee hearing, I'd like to go over the order of things. We'll first hear from our chief legislative analyst and our city administrative officer to be present to answer any questions that you might have. And after we hear from our CLA, we'll open it up, colleagues, to comments and questions. So I believe we have Mr. Wickham here representing the CLA to walk us through the CLA report. And John, I don't see you yet on my screen, but you might be there.
I am here. Good morning. It's still morning.
Good morning. Welcome and thank you.
Great. Thank you. John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. Before you is a report that we've prepared in response to motion Krikorian, Price, Rahman, Ridley, Thomas, asking for the development of a citywide framework on existing and new outreach efforts to ensure that we provide a way to help persons experiencing homelessness receive services and housing to stabilize their lives. The outreach has always been a part of what the comprehensive homeless system has been doing. LOS has been doing this for over 20 years. But with the approval of Measure H a couple years ago, and then the concurrent approval and allocation of funding from the city to support different outreach programs related to sanitation programs, and then beyond that, suddenly over the last 3 or 4 years, a great deal of money has come into the area of outreach. And it's coming quickly, and there have been efforts to set up new programs and new efforts to address certain types of outreach. This motion recognizes, I think, that there needed to be a review of the overall approach and to establish outreach within a larger framework so that there is consistency and effectiveness built into the system. As you recall from our conversation on governance a couple months ago, there are 4 parts to the comprehensive homelessness system: prevention, housing, rehousing, and street management. Street management is really the major public-facing part of this system, and it deals with this interaction with persons experiencing homelessness and how we communicate with them and help them to receive services and housing and help them come inside. It also, as you've discussed already, it deals with the situation of the greater public health and safety with ADA, with street clearance, and making sure that the streets are healthy and passable. So it really is something that affects all of us, everybody, when they're in the public space. In preparing our report, we interviewed a number of departments, and I want to especially thank the CAO and City Attorney for their assistance in the Bureau of Sanitation. We spoke extensively with LASA, with some nonprofit organizations, and with many council offices. And we spoke many times with all of these parties because there's a great deal of information. This is extremely complicated system and structure that's in place. And so I just want to express our gratitude for that. The framework that we recommend has three key components. The first is emergency outreach, and this entails two different types of emergencies. If there's a wildfire coming, or there is like the hepatitis A outbreak that occurred a couple years ago, or COVID-19, you need to be able to get out to people who are living on the streets and provide information to them immediately about this immediate threat that is in front of them so that they can prepare and we can protect their health and safety. The other situation that occurs is when an individual is having a mental health crisis, for example, and they are wandering in traffic, and there needs to be some kind of a response to help this person immediately. These are emergency responses. They're about dealing with the event happening immediately at that time. It's not about connecting to services and housing yet. The next part of the major outreach framework is service-focused outreach. And this is the work that's required to connect people to services and to housing to help them come inside. And we know that in some cases, this can be a 2-week process, or it can be a 10-week process. It depends on the individuals, the ability to connect with them, to build trust, to find the services that they need, and to connect them to those services, and to find the housing that they need, and to get them into that housing. And sometimes it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it can happen relatively quickly, depending on the resources that are available. The third type of outreach is sanitation outreach. And this deals with the operations to keep the public right-of-way clean and clear and healthy and safe. And there are two types of programs. On January 29th, the council adopted a report from the LA Bureau of Sanitation outlining the Care Plus program, which would provide that an outreach team would go out 14 days in advance and over the course of a 14-day period to inform an encampment that a cleanup will be happening. And then after the 14 days, LA San and the outreach team will be there present during the cleanup to help ensure that there's compliance with the process, ensure that people understand what the cleanup process is and how it's being conducted. The other type of cleanup is a spot cleanup, when LA San goes out and they just make sure that there's ADA compliance, that the people are not blocking fire hydrants, et cetera, and those can happen very quickly. So recognizing this structure now allows us to develop a staffing plan and program that puts teams in place in a way that will allow them to focus on the work that needs to be conducted. And in the proposal that we had a couple of overarching goals. We wanted to make sure that we provide council offices with the flexibility to identify the services that are most appropriate and the approaches that are most appropriate and needed for their community. We wanted to make sure that there are clear roles and responsibilities for all of the agencies and departments and service providers who are participating in these programs and doing this work. We wanted to make sure that we have a full coordination system so that it's clear from the beginning through the entire process who is the lead at any given point in doing the work on the street, and how are resources being coordinated and brought in when needed. We wanted to make sure that there are data and there are metrics in place that allow us to fully evaluate the program and allow us to amend and adjust the program down the line. We want to make sure that all of this is fully documented in contracts, memoranda of understanding, letters of agreement, other operating procedures, etc., so that everybody clearly understands how the program is going to work and how it will be implemented, and that when we have the data and metrics on the work being provided, we can hold people accountable for that work. So what we recommend in our structure is summarized fully in attachment A to our report. And what we're recommending is that, first off, that on the emergency outreach, that work would be conducted through the new Circle program that you have funded, as well as the unarmed response program that the council is creating. And that way we'll have a process and ability to deal with immediate individual personal emergencies that are arising. In addition, the homeless engagement teams, the HETs, could be drawn in to deal with larger regional emergencies that arise, such as a wildfire, when those occur. And we'll need to have a procedure in place so that we can quickly draw HET teams in to go out and do that work. And we've also, as we'll discuss in a little bit, created some supplemental HET teams who can be drawn in immediately on that without disrupting any other outreach that might be happening in the system. The second category we have for the service-focused outreach. There's currently 17 HETs in place for outreach across the city that the city funds. 7 of them are geography-based, 6 are in downtown, 1 is in Hollywood, and then there are 10 that are working citywide. What we are recommending is those 7 geography-based stay in place, and that we supplement that group with an additional 5 HETs. This will allow each council district to have 1 HET that is dedicated to the work in their district. We also recommend that we retain the roadmap teams so that which are currently in place, that will be 1 roadmap team in each council district focused on implementation of the roadmap. We also recommend moving the current care teams, there are 15 care teams, again, assign 1 each to the council districts so that we can supplement the service-focused outreach in the council districts. What this will provide you is a total of 2 HET teams to do service-focused outreach, as well as your roadmap team. And in this category of service-focused outreach, which is the day-to-day work of connecting people with services and housing, you will be able to use those teams to do the street strategy work in accordance with the criteria in the CAO report. You will be able to deploy them in proactive outreach that is, guided in a variety of different ways, whether that's an encampment to home approach, or whether that's an approach that deals with individuals along a particular street. However, you need to allocate those resources to connect people to services and housing, you will have those teams in place at your direction in cooperation with LASA and with UHRC or in the CAO or however our coordinating structure is in place. Finally, we recognized that when we were doing our research and we saw that there were 7 geography-based teams, that there are actually other areas of the city that could use additional resources. And so we ran the numbers and we saw that there are, we would recommend that there are 8 additional HETs that would be assigned to districts that need additional assistance in outreach. And then, and so we're recommending taking the Care Plus teams and moving those into this category. That would leave five Care Plus teams to serve as supplemental HETs. Those 5 teams could be deployed on weekends after hours. Those 5 teams could be deployed for emergencies. Those 5 teams could be deployed when there are major significant encampment programs and operations underway. So for example, when Venice was being assisted recently, there were resources from all over the region that were being drawn from their work in order to assist that major operation. This will actually put 5 teams in place so that but rather than disturbing all of the other work going on, you can bring those 5 teams in immediately to deal with a major event that is underway. So again, this gives you the flexibility to focus on a 4118 operation, a proactive operation, and general outreach, however you see fit with the work that you're doing. It gives you great flexibility to do that. And then finally, we have on the sanitation outreach side, we recommend that the city retain a contractor or contractors through a bidding process, an RFP, and we go out with a very specific scope of work based on the program that was approved by council on June 29th, as outlined by LA SAN, to ensure that these teams that are selected to do this work are focused on compliance with the cleanup operation, ensure that the people in an encampment know that the event is coming, the operation is coming, know what is happening during that event, know where they should be, know what they need to pack up. If they have trash that they want to throw away, that we will be able to take that trash for them. And that outreach team is there on the day of the cleanup operation. And people on the street know that they are their contact. And this will allow the outreach team to do the people work while LA SAN does the sanitation cleanup work. And really want to emphasize across all of these that everybody is able to focus on the work that they do best and communicate in ways to hopefully ensure that we're successful in all of these operations. We have a few additional recommendations in our report. So our report is basically structured to achieve that. We do recommend funding the current LAHSA outreach programs for an additional 3 months until we can get all of these program elements in place. And then we have some additional, some recommendations for additional work. So for example, during our interviews, we discovered that, first off, that LAHSA does have program elements in place for culturally appropriate outreach. But Los Angeles is so diverse and there are so many interesting things happening here that we need to think beyond just the basics on what culturally diverse appropriate outreach means, so that we can connect with people immediately and directly in effective ways. And the same is with people who have disabilities, that we need to be able to identify and help people who have disabilities quickly and directly. And so there's work that needs to be done in identifying new ways to connect cultural and disability appropriate outreach in the program. And then there are a few other recommendations to fill out the program. And that is basically the big overarching summary. So thank you very much.
John, I can't thank you enough. And colleagues, before I ask my questions, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Ridley Thomas right after that. And then of course, we'll all weigh in. But I just want to mention something about John Wickham. So over the years, Mr. Wickham has traveled with me to Sacramento on my lobbying junkets, making the case for a higher level of funding for the city of Los Angeles so that we have the resources commensurate with the need. So John has been at this for a long, long time. It's a subject that he knows very well. And I'm very grateful to you, John, for being the author of this report. I know you worked morning, day, and night, even through some vacation time over the last, I believe, 3 weeks, two weeks or so, 3 weeks, to get this report done. So I just want to give you a shout out. and thank you for your work and knowledge on this issue and your breadth of evaluating and speaking with groups and evaluating what you've been told after consulting with the various entities. I also want to just say that there are a lot of elements that sort of add up to our overall approach that are, moving parts, if you will, that are going on currently. Recently, a clean team was pioneered in the 14th Council District through Urban Alchemy, which is a nonprofit that's been doing amazing work across the city and especially in my district, just phenomenal. And Mr. De Leon and I recently announced an initiative to take the clean team, which is what they do citywide, which is part and parcel of this approach that Mr. Wickham just described, in that it removes our city sanitation workforce away from interaction and puts the interaction with the experts who know how to do the engagement, wherein sanitation will dispose of items on a regular basis that folks who are experiencing homelessness are ready to let go of. And so you, in your report, conveyed an element of what Mr. De Leon and I believe could work citywide already, that could be in concert with some of your suggestions. So that's just an immediate take on your report. My questions now, and I want to thank Valerie Flores, our city attorney, and Yolanda Yolanda from the CAO's office, for being here as well to answer questions that you all may have, colleagues. John, how much time will it take to complete all the hiring and training for the proposed teams necessary to effectuate the outreach engagement framework? Do you have a sense of that?
As far as the service-focused teams, many of them should already be in place, and so it's a matter of reorganizing and restructuring those teams to bring them into that workflow. We actually, and I forgot to mention this, we have a coordination, an internal city coordination process that we've recommended, and we would want to get moving on that real quickly so that we can allow the council offices in the city to improve its coordination and direction on that as soon as possible. I think the longer lead time is going to be the contracting process on the sanitation piece. And so we would want to get moving on that as soon as possible.
Thank you. And how much time will it take for sanitation outreach requests for bids to be completed and for a list to be available for council offices?
Yeah, that can take a few months. That's, I think we're looking, it's probably it's probably 5 to 6 months.
And judging by that answer, I think it's, I want to just state clearly that happens concurrently while the street engagement teams are already doing their work. Nothing halts that, and nothing halts the process moving forward, and working diligently to meet compliance. And then next question, within attachment A under the service-focused outreach staffing section, the 5th point talks about 5 general homeless engagement teams being available for weekend and supplemental outreach. But homelessness, as we all know, does not stop at 5 p.m. Oftentimes, the prime opportunity to help someone is away from the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It's a constant state of distress and possible traumas that we needn't bury our head in the sand to avoid, knowing more about. We need to add a nighttime after hours component to our outreach strategy, which is why I'm going to make this formal instruction, and you'll hear the instructions in a bit that I've come up with. When the council adopted Care Plus comprehensive service days, one of the recommendations was to require outreach teams to be present during the service day and prior to the service day. One of the CLA report recommendations is to extend loss of funding for 3 additional months so that the street engagement currently being conducted can continue unabated. Do we need to amend anything in our contract with LASA to make sure that their teams are present during present during and prior to service days?
We may. We'll have to check on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we all know, this is another requirement that we need to make sure moves forward to ensure that outreach workers are present during the days of service. And that has in the past been wildly inconsistent. So that's something that we're going to tighten up for sure. What sources of funding are we looking to use for the hiring of the 5 regional outreach coordinators that you mentioned and the director for homeless outreach coordination?
Our recommendation is to ask the CAO to identify the source of funds for those additional programs. And so it would be great to have that work come back to you very quickly.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you. And then where will the funding come from to hire the outreach coordinator for each council office? Is that also CAO?
Yes.
Okay. And what role, if any, will the county providers play in emergency outreach?
Yeah, the county absolutely has a significant role in the entire outreach system. And they have there's a coordinating process established over at LASA. And almost all of the outreach teams in the system are coordinated through that process called the E6 process. And so once we have our system in place, we'll be able to connect that to that system to ensure that we can draw on county resources as well. Further, we're recommending that the city engage the county and develop a memorandum of understanding that further documents the work effort and our coordination and cooperation in this area. So it's very clear, again, we discuss this in governance, we're discussing it now. Ensure that everybody has a clear understanding of their role and responsibility in the system so that we can all hold each other accountable and we can all be effective and efficient moving the program forward.
Thank you. And then lastly, before I turn over to Mr. Ridley Thomas, the report indicates that there will be 5 regional coordinators, each representing 3 council districts. How will the geographic jurisdictions be decided?
Yeah, this was a little creative work on our side. We noticed that the Bureau of Sanitation has 5 yards from which they deploy their sanitation teams for the cleanups. And so I'm hopeful that there may be a way to align those 5 regional coordinators with the council districts and with the sanitation yards, so that the effort is to bring our resources together in a way that's aligned well.
Great. As you give the report and as you're answering these questions, I'm taking notes, and the word nimble is I think essential to incorporate into all of these coordinated systems, and then make sure that nothing we do is duplicative, right? And so I think it'll be something to just keep an eye on as we stand up the resources, as the street engagement teams do their work, and as we gain compliance by leading with services and not enforcement. And I think that all of those, as you said, need to align, and then I think we'll be in business. Mr. Ridley Thomas, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, colleagues. As I say, today we have the opportunity to consider 2 interrelated reports on street engagement, one from the CAO and one from the CLA, Yolanda Chavez and John Wickham, respectively. I hasten to add that both entities have worked closely together to craft what emerges as a unified framework of street outreach and engagement that can be deployed citywide. On August the 12th, after a careful, thoughtful discussion in which both Mr. De Leon, Vice Chair of Homelessness and Poverty, and I participated with our colleagues on that committee. We approved the proposed CAO street engagement strategy. And today, as you've indicated, Mr. Chair, in this committee, we will have an opportunity to discuss a follow-up report that essentially builds on that and adds further refinement, as we just heard. It goes into greater details. Detail creates more context, and as well, it proposes funding to implement the work and enhances the funding that, in fact, was proposed by the CAO in its report. I think the two reports complement each other, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, with the end goal of housing our unhoused residents. I could not agree more that the end goal has to ultimately be housing. And street engagement is just instrumental, you might say, in that effort. As I think we described before, and as was described in these reports, successful street engagement should have at least three components: dedicated street outreach personnel that can provide regular, consistent contact, outreach, encampment by encampment. And colleagues, in some instances, that may mean on a daily basis. The second element, I think, is swift access to specialized interim housing beds and services. Go directly to the question of housing when we talk about interim housing beds and services. What do we mean by that? As is indicated, substance use beds, mental health beds, recuperative care beds, tertiary level mental health services. All of that is critically important in terms of what we talk about with respect to a successful street engagement. And finally, I think we have to have sufficient permanent housing at our disposal, such as short and long-term rental assistance. This is not reducible necessarily to a rigorous construction program. It is a ready supply of landlords with available housing units to place clients. And so I think we need to be imaginative, creative, as is being proposed and or prescribed by these two reports. Mr. Chairman, without a street engagement strategy in place, we know that an enforcement alone approach will simply shuffle unhoused residents throughout the city, from one end of the district that we represent to the other, from one end of the city to the other. That's not what we want. That is costly, that is inhumane, that is ineffective. That in part could be described as the status quo. But street engagement is not to be considered theoretical. And I think the reports have made that rather clear. It requires thoughtful and consistent approaches and a well-trained staff to make a difference. It is effectively boots on the ground, doing the work that we know needs to be done. So I want to say thank you to John. I want to say thank you to Yolanda and your respective supervisors, Sharon So and Matt Zabo, for all the work that's been done. It's important, and I believe it will be consequential. And so I think, Mr. Chair, I'll rest at that point in terms of the remarks that need to be made, but would conclude by indicating that a robust and scalable street engagement strategy, a robust and scalable street engagement strategy, I repeat, a robust and scalable street engagement strategy is the order of the day. And we need to pursue it with urgency. And on that point, I want to salute the chair for scheduling this special committee. The CLA's report was just done 48 hours ago, and here we are in committee taking this matter up. That suggests to me that the chair senses and wants to act with a degree of urgency. And that needs to be the ethos that typifies the work that we bring to bear with respect to this. And I would trust in the intentionality that informs it will drive how quickly this gets to the full council for adoption, consistent with the original vote that was taken in a 13-2 effort to say that we need to move forward with the street engagement, enlightened and thoughtful work that has to be the predicate for any other kind of activity that might happen pursuant to 4118. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley Thomas. And I have to commend your team and Mr. Krikorian's team and Mr. De Leon's team and Mr. Kraus's team. My office, we've been burning the midnight oil since Tuesday morning. And but that's our job. We embrace it. We love it. We really wanted to dissect this report and dissect Yolanda's Chavez's report, and really kind of get cracking on making this all work, because we are united behind the theme of making sure that compliance is always preceded by street engagement. I think everyone's on board as never before, and that's the direction we're heading in a very concise, compassionate, clear way. It requires determination, action, and compassion for sure. And your team and all the teams working on this have been amazing in the past 48 hours. So I thank you for your remarks and again for your work in your committee on this matter, Mr. Ridley Thomas. And we'll go to Mr. De Leon next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm glad that we're having this robust conversation today to discuss how we outreach to our homeless sisters and brothers. What is clear, and I think there's universal agreement across the board, is that the existing system is not working. And the city funds dozens of teams, but roles and responsibilities are not clear, and staff is not used to the best of their ability. So I want to thank the CLA's office for this report and presentation today. The document puts into place, I believe, a lot of the pieces we need as a city to start consistent engagement with our homeless neighbors. This report is a great step forward, first step forward in addressing the staffing needs and the direction of their deployment. But as I have said ad nauseum on numerous occasions, housing must be our number one priority. That's why I introduced with my colleague and our chair, our colleagues, including Councilmember O'Farrell, 25 by 25, the goal to provide 25,000 units of homeless housing, regardless of the type, by the year 2025. In August, our council, working with our chair of Homeless and Poverty Committee, Mr. Mark Ridley Thomas, we passed this plan unanimously. And by doing so, I look forward to the CLA reporting back and how we achieve this in a way that is equitable, that is humane, but that is cost effective. We all know that we need housing. The past year we have shown as a council that we can produce housing quickly, which is why I am confident. I am confident that we can actually reach this goal. Now, Mr. Chair, in regards to this report, the report that's before us, I'm pleased to see that we are developing a system to manage both the outreach and coordination to ensure we are maximizing our efforts. And that's why I want to make sure that we are able to modify today's report to incorporate the UHRC as the nerve center for organizing all of this, which is a concern that I raised in the Homeless and Poverty Committee. I'm also hoping that we can place the city homeless outreach coordinator unit in the UHRC to maximize our efficiencies when working with our city family, so we don't have we don't have parallel systems using the same city resources. So that being said, I have a few questions. One is, I like the homeless coordinator roles that will facilitate between the council districts and the outreach coordinator for the city. How, to the CLA and CEO as well, to both John and Yolanda, how can we ensure that they're divided equitably across the city?
You mean the teams themselves?
The team themselves.
Yeah, so the allocation that we have in our plan ensures that there is a base of two teams per council district, in addition to the roadmap team. And I say that the roadmap team separately because we have, the roadmap team was created in response to the Alliance lawsuit. It is a separate funding source. It's a separate contractual obligation to make placements into housing that we're creating under that program. So that's why I am distinguishing a little bit. But every council district gets a base of two HETs as well as a roadmap team. In addition, we looked at the 2020 unsheltered population count and did a little math to identify areas of the city where there is a much larger population and more outreach teams might be helpful in those areas. As you would know, downtown in particular has a large population. We already had 6 HET teams assigned to downtown. So there was good coverage in that area, but there are other areas of the city, particularly Council District 9, Council District 11, Council District 13, and a few others, where additional HET teams would be helpful in dealing with the size of the population in place. And at a certain point, though, we get to a situation where there's too much outreach based on the available housing, and so we wind up with a crunch where we're talking to everybody, but we have no place to house them. And so we're trying to do a balance here that grows into the system as it grows itself.
John, and maybe I should have, and I apologize, and maybe I should have been a little more clear, and I accept responsibility for that. I was not so much referring to the HET or the HET teams, but more so the coordinator role is what I'm referring to more specifically.
Okay.
That's my fault. So I apologize.
So maybe I could add, good morning, this is Yolanda Chavez with the CEO's office. I think that when we come back on the recommendations for funding, we can give you a little bit more specifics to ensure that really the coordination is balanced, especially where the highest need is. Because we are going to come back with a report back on how we're going to fund these additional recommendations in the CLA's report, as well as come back at some point with the results of an RFP or RFQ for the outreach team for sanitation, which will take a couple of months. But I think the goal is always to have the new team, especially for sanitation, ready by the start of the next fiscal year, given that we do have to go through an RFP or RFQ.
Okay, thank you. And the reason why is also is in the report it mentions mirroring that of the LA San liaison, and I love, for example, Vladimir Campos, who's currently our LA San point of contact. However, I also recognize that he covers, along with my office, CD14. He has CD1, CD4, and 13. So he has 1, 4, 13, and 14. And that represents over a guesstimated 11,000 unsheltered residents. So I understand that this may be more of a policy decision once we have adopted what we may or may not adopt soon, but I would like to go on the record for this. And while we're on the subject of LA San, I just have a couple more questions. I think it's great that we are working at contracting out the outreach portion of our LA San operations. I hope that we can really leverage the local hires and get a lot of great organizations that hire the residents with the lived experience. So I have just two more questions, which is for both CLA, for both you, John, and as well as Yolanda, is there a way that we can ensure the LA SAN outreach providers have access to the homeless management information system and the coordinated entry systems, the CSC?
It's long.
I was going to say we should be thoughtful about what that would mean and what that is. As I indicated in our report, it's important that the sanitation teams focus on the sanitation operation. It may be that in the course of that operation, somebody indicates a request for service and housing, and we need to be able to make those connections. But the sanitation operation is a very specific type of activity, and you need a very specific type of compliance for the success of that event. And it's important to spend the time making sure that people know where they're supposed to move to get out of the way for the sanitation event, that they know how to deal with their property, what choices that they need to make for dealing with that property. And so we want to be careful that we're not confusing the workflow and the workloads. And putting more on the sanitation team runs a risk of taking them away from the priority work of dealing with the sanitation operation itself.
Well, let me ask a question then. Say, for example, Urban Alchemy is part of the outreach team. And for example, they encounter an encampment where they say, yes, but we want access to housing, as opposed to them engaging with residents and trying to find a case manager. How can we limit the number of handoffs? Because my concern is, again, we create this mammoth bureaucratic, I got the pink form, the blue form, the yellow form, the white form, and all we're doing is going in circles all over again, and the dog is chasing its tail, and we're not getting to what we want, our desired outcomes. So how do we, collapse walls and make it much more efficient so we can achieve our goals of what we desire?
So that's another reason to make sure that the sanitation team is not in that, because we have this situation now where it seems like a lot of teams are going out and talking to the same people, and people on the street are confused who's helping them and when they're helping them. So the outreach teams, your heads, will be going out and working with this population to begin with. So by the time you get to the point of designating an area for a sanitation care plus cleanup, you should already have a HET team and additional outreach teams, MDTs, et cetera, who are lined up and identified as leads for that encampment. So if we're doing the coordination right, the sanitation team doesn't need to know that. All they need to know is who is the lead for helping with services and housing, so that when they get a question, they can immediately make that referral back, or to bring out that lead team, so that you are not duplicating efforts. You are actually being more efficient in the deployment of your resources.
No, that's an excellent answer, John. The execution now has to match, right, what you just said. So that's the key thing, right? We have absolutely we got reports. Like I said, we have so many report backs that everyone around the horseshoe should already have a PhD on this issue. So now it's the execution, actually. One thing is when you prepare a championship fight. Another thing is when they hit you across the jaw, and all of a sudden all those plans go out the door or out the window, right? So that's two different things. So I agree with you. That's an excellent answer. The question now is the execution. Through the chair, just one last question, which is normally shelter and permanent supportive housing beds are filled through the CSE, the coordinated entry system. Will the council directed homeless engagement teams, the HETs, so the HATs, and LA San contracted outreach, teams work through CES to assist getting those off the street that are ready, or will they be able to do reverse match, residents to open the beds up to the community? This is specific to the reverse match, given the crisis, as opposed to going through, A through Z, 1 through 10, filling it all out. Will they be able to do the reverse match? Is my question.
So I guess I will answer that question. The teams would have to go through the CES system for permanent supportive housing units, because that's actually required by HUD regulations in relation to the continuum of care.
All right. Okay. So that's clear. Okay. So that no reverse match.
Correct.
No reverse match.
But they will ensure that everyone is in the CES system, so that if there are opportunities, they will be the next tenant, in line for that unit.
Okay. My only concern is that with the reverse match, we're able to house, immediately without the process. It's like house and ask questions later, as opposed to get all the input, put all the data in the system. But what you're telling me, Yolanda, and it is what it is, right? That's the HUD requirements because of the continuum of care system that exists. We may not have the wiggle room for the flexibility.
Exactly, but based on the street strategy, right? The leads together with the SPA lead and LASA and will identify sort of that housing portfolio that's available, right, as they're doing outreach. So whether it's interim beds or home key beds or other type of interim, or other permanent, it could be through rapid rehousing, right? That's the whole point of identifying that portfolio as they're doing outreach to clear an encampment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Yolanda, and thank you, John. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for your indulgence.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Leon. Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to thank the CLA and CAO and sanitation for truly digging into an issue that's one of the most protracted and complicated and heart-wrenching issues of our time. Homelessness itself is complicated by a number of factors, individual levels of acuity, the specific crises that people have endured before they became homeless and after substance abuse, and on and on. But then we had other complicating factors that often of our own making. The multitude of bureaucratic agencies and government entities involved in our response, the lack of transparency and accountability, the number of terribly insufficient funding sources that come with their own programmatic requirements. And then we take a dive into the root causes of homelessness, which are many. So I'd like to start by joining my colleagues in extending my sincere thanks to all the staff that have spent so much time and effort in trying to figure out the particular pieces of this puzzle. And with that said, I had a bunch of questions. Some of them have been answered, so I'll only ask a couple. First of all, the coordination plan in the framework section of the report appears to be headed in the right direction with regards to deployments and data collection. But I didn't see much discussion about the intervention side of the coin. So has there been discussion about making available current information on housing interventions that are available on any given day in a particular location, and even with specific individuals? How do we make sure that we have that information available to us?
So I think Yolanda might be able to discuss this as well, but as she indicated, the HET teams should, I got to stop saying that. HET teams is redundant. The HETs should be working with LASA and with the service providers, the SPA leads, to keep a constant inventory of the housing resources that are available at any given time. So when your pets are out there doing the work and they're looking to make those connections to housing, they should know what those resources are. So they should be maintaining that on a regular basis.
Okay, and on page 19 of the CLA's report, it's noted that an estimated 25% of unhoused individuals in LA have a substance abuse disorder and 11% have a developmental disability, and that the Department of Disability recommends that outreach programs incorporate mental health or substance abuse specialists in all outreach teams. And I like that idea, but I imagine this would be quite costly. I understand the city is setting up 2 programs, the Circle program in Hollywood and Venice, and the Unarmed Crisis Response Team citywide to address emergency and special service needs, hopefully 24/7. And I'm interested in seeing how these programs do, but I don't think they're nearly enough considering how pervasive mental health issues are in our unhoused population. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to the question, but do we have anything approximating a sufficient number of beds for individuals experiencing acute or chronic mental health issues? And if not, how do we get there?
Yeah, we don't. And we've had a number of conversations with the county about this and with LASA and the city family internally. We have reports coming forward to you on the right to housing and on the 25 by 25, both of which must take this question into consideration. So we're doing that work with the housing department. And we need to continue the conversations with the county to identify ways that we can streamline these processes, because they're very complicated. In a sense, we need another report like the ones that the CLA and the CAO had just prepared for you, just on that side of the system, the higher level of care piece of the puzzle. That's not an area of specialty within the city. We have a lot to learn, and we have a lot to do to ensure that we can create solutions that are more effective in that area.
And I also think, and I would add that the county is working on increasing those number of beds. And I think that's part of our conversation with the county on this MOU as to how we support that. With their MDT teams, you know, that in terms of assistance on the street and referrals is already happening, but there's still not enough beds. But I know that the county is focused on increasing the number of those types of beds.
And of course, if we reached the point where we had enough beds, that would be for our current circumstance where we can only hold people for a couple of days. And so even though it would be a far off goal that barely scratches the surface, and we obviously know, and I know Councilmember O'Farrell has discussed this at various times at meetings, and we all know we need to get the state to fully fund and fully take responsibility for the mentally ill in this state. And if they don't do it themselves, but fully fund it, they need to do it in such a way that the money gets to the city of Los Angeles and we get to fully address the problem. I mean, leaving people out on the street shrieking, attacking one another, and people. I saw one of the worst examples about a year or two ago when a homeless woman dragging a piece of luggage decided to, in rush hour traffic, run out into the middle of the street, fortunately in front of me, and lie down in one lane and put her luggage in the next lane. You know, I did call LAPD. We got somebody out there very quickly. They led her to the sidewalk and told her why that was a bad idea, and they left. And I was in the middle of traffic, so I didn't really have the ability to follow up to make sure it was handled properly. But I don't think she was run over. But we can't leave people in this kind of circumstance. It's not for their own benefit that the right to remain out in public unserved and to threaten themselves and others with harm or eventually die on the street from exposure or disease. This is not a right that we should be giving anybody. So we need to work legislatively as well with the state to give us more leeway to keep those who are dramatically mentally challenged in for a longer period of time to actually make an effort to treat their condition. So all of those things are such a key, and it won't solve all of our homeless problem, but it'll solve the absolute most pressing that we've had for decades and have never been able to address because of all these constraints.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. And the point you bring up in terms of the county is going to be an instruction to be added to a revised attachment A, a coordination with the county on data as it relates to what they have available. Because right now, they're not guaranteeing us anything, one single bed of any kind anywhere. So that'll be an instruction, and I'll read those instructions aloud. It's going to take a while. I've been making notes, and we have instructions and all sorts of things, but that will be addressed. And the description of the incident that you encountered can be repeated across the city every single day. I can't tell you the amount of times I've called 911 I've experienced the same thing. Someone laying down in traffic on Main Street at dusk, and I was sure this man was going to get run over, but he laid down in lanes of traffic with cars whizzing by. So, and we're just, Angelinos like the other nearly 4 million. So people across the city experience this all the time. Folks that are in great distress and who need immediate attention. And this is exactly why we've been talking about how the status quo just is not cutting it, nor is the agreement we've had with the county for 57 years. That's not cutting it either. We have a lot of deep digging to do and reevaluating. And you're right, this isn't going to solve everything, but this is a giant step in a realigned approach, a service-oriented approach that leads to compliance. Anyway, your remarks are very relatable, I'm sure, to everyone who's listening today. And with that, Mr. Krikorian, do you have anything to add?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to start just by expressing my appreciation for your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and that of Chairman Ridley Thomas, because I think what we have before us today really fundamentally changes the status quo on homelessness. And 4118 revisions alone were not going to be sufficient to do that. Continuing an outreach pattern as we have had for these many years was not going to do that. But by bringing these objectives together and proceeding with common sense ways to keep our rights of way clear and to protect the safety of our neighborhoods and to protect the safety of unhoused individuals living in encampments together, with providing a services first approach with a goal of getting our entire homeless population housed. Those objectives, I think, are would not be possible without the combination that we have before us of a robust, citywide, thoughtful street engagement strategy, together with the revisions that we've made in 4118. And so I want to thank both of you for your leadership in achieving both of those two things. And as we have all mentioned, we have to really highlight the work of Ms. Chavez and Mr. Wickham, who have been immersed in this issue for so long and know every nuance of the issues that we have to deal with. And the thoughtful reports that are before us on street engagement are a reflection of that long experience, and really identifying what has worked and what has not worked in the way that engagement has been done. And so I have very few substantive comments because, we've been at this for so long and we've worked out issues informally and through discussions for so long that I really don't have a lot of substantive concerns. I do just want to really express that gratitude because not only will this be important substantively, but I think the steps we're taking today, as Chairman Ridley Thomas has mentioned many times, and I think many of us have, we need to also change the dialogue around homelessness in this city and take the conversation away from the extreme voices that we hear on both sides, on multiple sides. I shouldn't even say both sides because there's so many sides to so many issues of this. But the most extreme voices always want to create a false dichotomy, which is fundamentally flawed. That the approach to homelessness should either be, with police and enforcement first and only, or it should be laissez-faire, basically no ability to enforce even the most common sense kind of order on our streets. And both of those are absurd notions. We have to have both. When we look at the success, for example, of clearing the problems that were so apparent to the entire county of Los Angeles around Venice Beach, for example, that was not enforcement first. That was a service-oriented approach to clear Venice Beach. But it was made possible because we already had in place a prohibition on living at Venice Beach because Venice Beach is a park. So if we had not had that, a services only approach would have maintained the continued status quo on Venice Beach. So it's just wrong for people to suggest that you must only have one without the other. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for years. It's not going to work going forward. What we have before us is an effort to break ourselves free from that false dichotomy, and I think it's an important step. The one thing that I do want to just ask, particularly Mr. Wickham, as we move forward on this, because I also recognize that what we have before us is thoughtful, it's thorough, it's well-reasoned, it has been informed by best practices, it's been informed by stakeholders who have, a multiplicity of views about this. So in all of those ways, this is as thorough and as comprehensive as I would expect it to be. That being said, I think we all need to be clear-eyed about the fact that, as Mr. De Leon, I think, suggested, when it comes to implementation, that we're probably going to be back here many, many times, constantly revising this strategy, constantly supplementing it, constantly dealing with issues of funding and implementation and oversight and contractual issues with LASA and so many other things that we probably are not even anticipating now until we see how this rolls out. And that's okay. That's nothing to be concerned about. It should be a work in progress. It should be something that we're constantly improving upon based on experience. And I have no concerns or problems about that at all. I just think we need to be clear-eyed about that going forward. The one thing I do want to raise as a concern I have that I hope we'll be mindful of as we go forward is in how we include in this strategy the notion that we're not starting from zero. We're not starting today with street engagement as though street engagement has never happened until now. What we're starting with is a strategy that's on paper, that's thoughtful, that's taken into account many different concerns, budgetary, organizational, and otherwise. But by agreeing to this street engagement strategy today, I certainly don't want to suggest that street engagement has not been happening all along. And so when it comes to issues around some of the resolutions that I'm sure members will be starting to bring about particularly problematic areas, I want to make sure that we are respectful in this of the work, the services-oriented work that has already been done in particular locations. And I think that has to be captured as we talk about this, and not just act as though today is day one. It isn't. And I will give you a district-specific example. I have maybe my most complained about and also most dangerous encampment is in a freeway overpass that borders between my district and CD4. And it has existed literally for years. We have done extensive outreach to this encampment, literally for years. And finally, in recent weeks, I'm pleased to say that most of the individuals who had been living in that encampment have been housed or have otherwise found solutions that didn't involve continuing to be in that dangerous environment that they were in. But not all. And a few that remain are the sources of many of the problems for the other unhoused individuals that were living there. People who have, a long history of violence and, threats against their unhoused neighbors living in that encampment and so on. I fully intend to make sure that those people who have been creating those problems are faced with a choice. And that choice will be they can accept services, they can accept housing, but they will not be allowed to continue to stay there and create havoc and problems for the housed and unhoused alike. That will be their choice. It will include the offer of services, it will include an offer of housing, but they will not be allowed to continue to be there. And in bringing that choice forward, I think, there has to be recognition of the fact that these particular individuals have been offered services dozens and dozens and dozens of times going back at least 2 years. So I want to make sure that that concept is captured as we move forward. I don't mean to propose any suggested changes now in language or otherwise, but I do just want to ask how that concept will be reflected as we go forward.
So I would say, Councilman, that I completely agree with you. And in our street strategy report, we made it very clear that the strategy was based on best practices and lessons learned by all the work that has been done by all of you, by the council members. And in fact, the best practices we listed in the report all came from council offices in terms of your engagement. And so I think it's reflected in that there is no time limit in terms of outreach. We said, hey, one of the best practices is ample time, but it doesn't prevent you from saying we have made the housing offer numerous times. We're going to make one last offer, and then we're going to proceed, right, once you introduce your resolution. Because you have been doing this for, like you said, 2 years. So I think that the way both reports are written provide you with that flexibility. And we made it really clear that these procedures that we were proposing and amended at HMP on August 12th to make them more streamlined were based on what is going on today in terms of street to home engagement.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Mr. De Leon, did you have a follow-up on Mr. Koretz's county mental health?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually both Mr. Koretz and your comments as well, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, and it's my hope that this will be addressed in the report, but sort of kind of like the elephant in the room with regards to the severity of the mental health crisis that's playing out on our streets every single day. It's very difficult for us as members of the council to call DWP or to call LA Sanitation or to call planning department or building and safety or recreation and parks to deal with a mental health crisis, because we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the systems, and we don't have the expertise or the funding that goes with it. Given this is a huge elephant in the room, Ms. Chavez had mentioned that the county is working on it. If I heard you, I know I'm paraphrasing. It's not verbatim. I just wanted to ask, what does that mean exactly? You know, they're working on it.
So I was talking about increasing the rooms, but I think what I want to clarify is that there are already multidisciplinary teams that are county teams that the county funds and the city funds, right? So the city actually funds a number of these MDT teams that provide additional, and this is for people that need additional mental and behavioral health services. So what happens now in the regular outreach and coordination of these teams is that when the outreach teams go out there to start doing outreach and engage in an encampment, they identify those people that need additional mental and behavioral health services. And then the MDT team comes in to provide those services. So I think what we just want to clarify that these MDT teams are active today. There are a number of those teams in your district, Mr. De Leon, specifically in Skid Row. I think there's at least John may have a better number, but in fact, these MDT teams were first started in Skid Row to test them, and we funded a portion of them, and now they're being funded completely by the county in Skid Row. And there's at least 3 of those teams, maybe more in Skid Row. There's also an MDT team in Council District 8, 9, 10. 2 new ones that were funded in the budget in CD4 and 11. And we're actually going to be funding a few more in the next roadmap report that will be before HMP shortly. So there are teams that really focus on this issue. And so what I was saying the county was working on was really increasing beds for people that need the more intensive services.
That's what I'm getting to, because you have all these teams out there who are offering services. Ultimately, if you have a cohort who have extreme mental health needs, they're chronically homeless because of the severity of the mental health issues. On the county side, you need the capacity and you need the beds. So I think it's a question is, are they going to be able to produce those number of beds? Number one. And if so, by when? Because this goes with all of our street operation services that we'll be voting on shortly. And then also too, I think it's important, Mr. Chair, is what role should the state of California play? Do they have to move legislation that enables the question with regards to Mr. Koretz just mentioned, I believe, or you may have been, Mr. Chair, the issue with regards to the 72-hour, hold and then folks are released, and it's sort of kind of we're going back and forth. We're just going back and forth. We're just going back and forth. Does it have to be longer than that? I know that my former colleague, State Senator Henry Stern, and John Sheeran, the director of the Mental Health Department for LA County, did an op-ed piece together that was published in the LA Times, broaching the subject with regards to the issue of conservatorship. Because as you had mentioned, we have so many very severe cases of individuals who are dying on our streets and not getting access to the services that they need. We cannot call DWP, we cannot call Building and Safety, Recs and Parks, or the other departments because they don't have the expertise. But we call these outreach teams. If there's no capacity on the county side, then we're just going around in circles is what we're doing. And we're wasting a ton of money doing all the outreach, but to what end? And so, and we see this being played out every single day because right now, the mental health, open air facilities that the LA County provides are the city streets of Los Angeles. And everyone loses across the board. That is the facility that we have. It's the open air, the open streets in the city of LA. That is what's going on right now. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon. All right, I'm going to wrap up this discussion, and I would like to do the following. What we have before us is a synthesizing of provisions that were outlined in the CAO's report, which we are now going to call Attachment C, and they contain modifications therein to that report. So what I'd like to do is the following, colleagues. Note and file the CAO report and add Attachment C, which has been circulated to everyone at this point, to the CLA report. And the CLA, Mr. Wickham will read this into the record, I believe. Please go ahead, John.
Okay, so this is the attachment that's been circulated, and I believe the clerk has a copy of this as well. It's titled Street Engagement and Hygiene, and this is a little extensive, so I'll be reading a little bit. Step 1, council member introduces resolution to implement 4118 C 1 through 4 and D. Tasks include council member introduces a resolution for LAMC section 4118 C 1 through 4 and D implementation for encamped sites. Where required by ordinance, findings and appropriate documentation will be made available regarding the location. Unified Homeless Response Center, UHRC, City Administrative Officer, CAO, informs Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LAHSA, Homeless Engagement Team, and the multidisciplinary team in sanitation outreach on resolution introduction. LAHSA, HET, and the MDT coordinate with UHRC, CAO to complete the engagement assessment form, the EAF, and submits the resolution council file and provides copies to council office and UHRC CAO. EAF includes encampment information, including population description, behavior, activity, health issues, concerns, immediate needs, such as debris, hazardous waste removal, hygiene, COVID-19 testing, vaccinations, etc. HET MDT coordinate with council office and UHRC CAO with appropriate city and county departments on immediate needs. HET MDT and sanitation outreach coordinate with council office and UHRC CAO on providing immediate cleaning and hygiene services. Council office determines the engagement lead. And the responsible entities include council member, UHRC CAO, LAHSA, HET, CES outreach coordinator, MDT, sanitation outreach. Step 2, engagement. Council office, LAHSA, lead. Identify housing and other resources. Outreach begins. HETS, LA SAN. Tasks include lead and LAHSA MDT in coordination with council office and UHRC CAO begin to identify housing and other services and resources. Lead works with coordinated entry system, CES, outreach coordinator to identify potential housing opportunities in local community-based organizations. Lead and team develop outreach plan based on in EAF and works with sanitation outreach to develop a street engagement hygiene plan. CES assessment for all dwellers present when possible. HET and MDTs identify persons with mental and other health needs and contact at SPA coordinator for county MDT support. The MDT initiates support and service for identified encampment dwellers. Based on EAF, an engagement timeframe is established and communicated with council office and UHRC CAO. At any time during the engagement period, LASA, MDT, and the lead will communicate with UHRC CAO if additional city resources are needed. The responsible parties include council office, lead, the LASA, CES outreach coordinator, LASA HET, MDT, sanitation outreach, UHRC CAO. And there's a note that under the tasks that LASA sanitation lead may request an LAPD escort to an encampment or homeless activity location at any time during the engagement cleaning effort. Step 3, data and reporting. The engagement lead will provide daily reports that provide data on specific services offered and accepted and the number of housing placements. At the end of the engagement, a final after-action report outlining final data on housing placements and services provided. The responsible parties include council office, lead, UHRC, CAO, LASA HET. Step 4, engagement completion, final cleanup. Tasks include lead coordinates with the engagement team of final engagement choice date. Final cleanup date is confirmed with LA Sanitation Outreach. It is present on final day. The council office recommends whether site should be fenced, etc. If a barrier is suggested for the site, the CAO coordinates with the council office and appropriate city departments on fencing or other type of barrier. Lead submits the final after action report 2 weeks after final cleanup to the UHRC CAO. Signage is installed by city department on first day following the 14-day period. Responsible parties are council office, lead, LA Sanitation Outreach, UHRC CAO, other city departments, LASA HET. Step 5, maintenance. Task is once a site is cleared, LASA HETs will continue to check the site and provide additional outreach if necessary. HETs will notify LA San of additional cleanup needed at the site. Responsible parties are council office, lead, LASA HET, LA San. Step 6, resolution and posting. LAMC section 4118 C 1 through 4 and D. Tasks are once the resolution is approved, the city will post signage at the designated area or areas set forth in the resolution, giving notice of the date after which sitting, lying, sleeping, or storing, etc. will not be allowed. UHRC CAO will work with city department on posting. Responsible parties are council office, LASA, UHRC, and CAO. And finally, step 7, compliance, LAMC section 4118 C 1 through 4 and D. Task, LASA HETs start check-in on sites 14 days after posting. If person experiencing homelessness have moved to the site in violation of the posting, the HETs should provide additional outreach to support voluntary compliance. Responsible parties, council office, LASA HET, LA San. And that is the amendment or the substitute for the program.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Wickham. Based on the comments and questions we heard today during this discussion, I'd now like to go over some amendments for the CLA's attachment A verbally. So I would like to add the following instructions on attachment A. And that is under implementation actions include, I'd like to add instruct Director of Homeless Outreach to develop a deployment plan for the outreach teams to allow for emergency outreach during off hours. Off meaning beyond Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I'd like to develop operational protocols to determine how such temporary reassignments would be activated. Furthermore, under service-focused outreach, I would like to replace under service-focused outreach could be conducted through, replace street strategy to achieve MC 4118 compliance with street engagement and management MC 4118 compliance attachment C. Furthermore, under the same, under staffing, I would like to add 5 general homeless engagement teams for weekend, nighttime, and supplemental outreach. Another addition under implementation actions include adding approve attachment C, remove approve the street strategy as recommended by the CAO and refined by this framework. Also remove instruct the CLA and CAO to refine the street strategy operating procedures and protocols within the context of this outreach engagement framework. And then add, under the direction of the CAO, add CLA and LASA to work with the Director of Homeless Outreach to develop operating procedures for proactive outreach efforts. Furthermore, add the following instructions. UHRC to coordinate with LASA and county to provide daily homeless intervention data to the HETs. Also, HETs to prioritize placing people experiencing homelessness at interventions within that service area. And also add under sanitation outreach, after Care Plus comprehensive cleanup and after spot cleanup, add street engagement and management, MC 4118 compliance attachment C. And under staffing, lastly, remove reference to spot cleanup. All right, so that completes attachment A revisions. Now I would like to go back to the CLA instructions. After this robust discussion, we are ready for a compassionate and comprehensive approach to making our sidewalks available and accessible for all Angelenos. So I'd like to add the following amendments to the CLA's recommendations, and they are, number 1, adopt the revised outreach engagement framework provided in revised attachment A to this report, which includes solutions for emergency outreach, service-focused outreach, and sanitation outreach. 2, instruct the Chief Legislative Analyst, City Administrative Officer, and Los Angeles Housing Department to negotiate a contract with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority for emergency outreach and service-focused outreach for persons experiencing homelessness with a detailed scope of work to define duties and responsibilities of the parties consistent with revised attachment A. Furthermore, instruct the CAO with the assistance of the CLA, LAHD, and LA Sanitation to prepare and release a request for bids seeking contractors to provide outreach services for persons experiencing homelessness related to comprehensive cleaning and rapid engagement plus, in other words, Care Plus. All right, I'm not done yet. I'm going to make sure I stay focused with all of these instructions, so bear with me here for a second. All right. Next, I would like to let's see. Bear with me. Thanks for bearing with me here. On the CLA instructions, furthermore, I'd like to add instruction 9. On instruction 9, it currently reads, instruct the CLA with the assistance of the CAO and other city departments as needed, and request LASA and the county to develop metrics and reports that measure outreach services, adding the following, and report back within 90 days. Also, instruction 10, request the city attorney to report on data confidentially concerning outreach programs and offer of housing documentation, adding and report back within 90 days. Furthermore, on instruction 12, add at the end and report back within 30 days. And instruction 13, add at the very end and report back within 30 days as well. And also, what I'd like to do is add the following instructions. Instruct the CLA with assistance from relevant city departments to develop a request for bids on general homeless engagement and report back to council within 60 days. Next, adopt attachment C. Next, instruct the CLA and CAO to ensure enough funding is provided so that each council district gets at least one LA Sanitation specific homeless engagement team for outreach purposes. And next, instruct the CLA and CAO to report back within 15 days on the necessary staff and funding for the printing and installation of MC 4118 signage. And I believe now that Mr. Ridley Thomas would like to add an instruction. Is that correct, sir?
Mr. Chair, I think you've pretty much exhaustively communicated the amendments that might be required for this point in time. And if such is the case and you're ready to move forward, sign me up accordingly. I just want to say what's important is the following, that there's one, accountability, two, there's documentation, and there's evidence that outreach has occurred, and that should be detailed in terms of housing placement outcomes. We have to make sure that in all of what we're doing, these things are reported out. And with that, I believe that the chair's amendments set us on an appropriate path that is forward. And I welcome the report backs that you've suggested. I anticipate that they'll be double referred to both housing, that is homelessness and poverty, as well as this committee, Mr. Chair. A lot of important work has been done. It's been done with the degree of care and concern. We make no claims about perfection. We essentially pursue progress. And I think such is the case today. And with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to move the matter that's before us. And I would ask that it go forthwith to the council consistent with the urgency that this issue requires.
Second.
Yes, thank you, sir, and thank you, gentlemen. And so, colleagues, if there are no objections, I would like to adopt this item as amended.
Amended.
Yes, so we're good, and are we clear on everything that we need to be included on what we're about to vote on, Mr. Wickham, Ms. Chavez, Mr. Villanueva, Mr. Prieto? Are we crystal clear on all these instructions?
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, because there's a July 28, 2021 CAO report, is it the intent of this committee to note and file that report?
It is.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Because we've incorporated and synthesized the two.
Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose we can now call the roll.
Certainly, sir. Councilmember Mitchell Farrell?
Aye.
Councilmember Mark Ridley Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Kevin De Leon?
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Krikorian?
Aye.
Sir, the item is approved as amended.
Terrific. Colleagues, staff, experts in the field, commissioners, I thank you all for guiding us collectively through this journey. I just can't express my gratitude and appreciation enough. Let's charge forth and do what we need to do. Thank you.
I would like to say thank you to you, Mr. Chair, for your leadership in this instance. I repeat that this matter, as amended, should go forthwith. And I trust that the clerk has gotten those instructions from the chair.
And I believe that is the order. And would you like to affirmatively state that, Mr. Villanueva?
Sir, it's noted, sir. Noted.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, do we have any other business before this special committee?
The desk is clear, sir.
Thanks again, all, very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Good afternoon.